Alright, so this is my second discussion based on the second set of readings. So again, I'm going to start with the book, What Should I Do? Confronting Dilemmas of Teaching in Urban Schools. We were supposed to read chapters 3 through 4, so I'm going to start with chapter 3. Chapter 3 mainly focused on developing strong relationships with your students. The author stressed the importance of how a strong, caring relationship with a student can impact one's teaching. Because again, the more you know about your students, the more you can help them, the more you can meet their needs. If you don't know your students, you're not going to know how to work around them, how to develop a curriculum that might help them better. So again, building strong relationships with your students. And they also included different case narratives that reflected the importance of strong student-teacher relationships. And they also discussed the struggle, which here's where the dilemma comes in, that many urban teachers face when attempting to relate to their diverse population of students. Because again, I mean, you're not going to be like every single one of your students, but again, if you show them that you care, if you show them that you want to get to know them, that you're interested in their lives not only within school, you can develop a relationship with them, and if they see that you care about them, they're going to be willing to take risks that they might not have been wanting to take before if they didn't feel comfortable with you. It can be difficult, just like in Josie's case, where she had a student that was constantly late and she didn't know why. And when she actually sat down to talk to her student, she realized that this girl was taking on a motherly role, you can say, for her younger brothers because of her mom, and it was difficult for her, and her mom was abusive in some way. And so Josie, even though Josie was able to develop that relationship with her where this girl was able to share this with her, her dilemma was, what was she supposed to do? Either, report this and maybe lose Josie's trust, or figure out some other solution. But again, overall, chapter 3 focuses on the importance of building a strong, caring relationship with your students. And then we went on to chapter 4, which pretty much was talking about connecting students to the content you're teaching them. So you don't want to be teaching students something that's not relatable to their lives, because they're not going to find it interesting. And it can be difficult, especially, I know, with math. I've had some trouble certain times trying to think of ways I can relate what I would be teaching to my students, real life experiences. But if you dig deep down, you can. And again, I mean, it's not going to happen all the time, but when you are able to connect what you're teaching to their real life experiences, they're going to be a lot more interested, and it's going to engage them in the content you're teaching them. Now, this can be difficult because, one, we're going to be working with a diverse group of students, and all our students are different. So being able to meet every single one of them might be difficult, and that was one of the dilemmas they talked about in this chapter. Another difficult thing to do with this would be the regulations and standardized tests. These constrain curricular choices, Again, especially with math and English, with the Common Core and all this, you're supposed to teach certain things at a certain pace, so sometimes it might be difficult to develop a curriculum in which you're trying to meet all your students' different cultures or personalities to relate the content to them. Especially with urban schools where the student population is highly diverse, teachers, it's going to be difficult again to address a wide range of student experiences, cultural backgrounds, language differences. But it's doable. Again, this book is trying to set us up for dilemmas we might face, and that's what it's talking about. So again, overall, chapter 4 focuses on dilemmas of curriculum and instruction. And then, so again, the author highlights the challenges that teachers face in engaging students, presenting culturally relevant content, and negotiating the demands of standardized testing for students who may have conflicting instructional needs. So again, just make content relevant to students. And then we went on to effective classroom management. Now for this book we had to read chapters 4 through 5, and again I'll start with chapter 4. Chapter 4 talked about establishing rules and routines in your classroom. We were able to learn about the difference between the two, and we saw that classroom rules are generally about overall conduct, whereas routines are much more specific to certain tasks and usually provide some direction about how these tasks should be accomplished. So again, then the author went on to remind us that when developing important rules, there are certain things to remember, such as 1, always develop a reasonable number of rules. If you develop too many rules, the students aren't going to be able to remember them, and they're not going to take all of them too seriously. So the author suggests 4 to 6 rules to cover everything you want to cover. And again, you can always, as I'm going to say later, you're going to be able to show students how to interpret these rules, so you don't need 20 rules. All you need is about 4 to 6 rules. Number 2, always remember to use positive language when writing the rules. For instance, if you want to put no running in class, a better way to write it would be walk at all times. That way you're not using the word no. So again, positive language. Another thing you might want to remember when developing classroom rules would be to make the rules consistent with school-wide rules. You want students to be able to connect the two, and it'll help them remember them too if they've seen them somewhere else. Also consider students' cultural backgrounds when developing rules. Number 5, teach and demonstrate each rule to them so they know what you mean by each rule. You don't want to just post them, you want to go over them you don't want to just post the rules, you want to make sure you go over the rules with your students. And also post rules in a prominent spot. You want students to be able to see these, always have access to these rules so they can see them. And the more they see them, obviously the more they're reminded of them. And finally, also remember to, or not remember, but take into consideration if you want to include the students in the development of the rules. You can do this as a first day activity. Again, there's pros and cons just like everything else. But if you do include your students in developing the rules, they will feel ownership and are more likely to follow the rules. It might be time consuming, but again, if they feel like they took a part in this, they're going to want to follow the rules. And then, obviously, aside from talking about classroom rules, chapter 4 also talked about the classroom routines. And the main thing to remember about this is that the author talked about how there's 3 categories of routines: classroom, movement, and lesson running. And again, just make sure you teach, demonstrate, and practice each routine with your students so they know what to expect. So again, it just focused on establishing classroom rules and classroom routines. And then chapter 5 went on to talk about developing relationships with your students. So again, it's very important for you to establish strong relationships with your students, because the more they feel cared for, that you genuinely care for them, they're going to be willing to take risks, participate in class, share their ideas, right? So it's a positive thing. Develop strong relationships with your students. They're more likely to cooperate, they're more likely to adhere to classroom rules and routines, and engage in academic activities if they have a strong relationship with you. And then in order to do so, you should always maintain a sense of humor. Make sure that, hey, if you make a mistake, you laugh at yourself. Be a real person. It's good if they see you, obviously, you're not just a teacher. You are more than just a teacher. So if they're able to see that, that's a good thing. Be welcoming. Make sure they feel welcomed in your classroom. Create that welcoming classroom atmosphere. Provide extra help if they need it. Be available for them. If they need extra help, ask them to make an appointment with you, whether it be before school, during lunch, after school, during a prep period of yours. whatever works best for you and for them, but make sure you're able to provide that extra help if they need it. Also encourage students to self-regulate their own learning. It's important for students to be on top of their own learning, to make sure where they stand. You just tell them where they stand. Also be available to talk, not just necessarily about school, but maybe if they have a problem going on and they want to share it with you, be there for them. Make sure you have that open mind. Also be sensitive to students' personal concerns. You don't want to put them down if they're talking to you about something, so be sensitive about it. Also learn about your students' cultural backgrounds. It's important to learn this because everyone comes with different things. You don't want to offend someone by saying something you should not have said. So it's better to learn about it than later say something that, again, you weren't supposed to say. And take a personal interest in students. This is also important because, again, if students feel that you genuinely care, they're going to participate more in your class and engage more in your class. And if you take a personal interest in your students, say if you have a football player in your class and he's always telling you to go to the games, go to the games. Show him that you support him in that sense too. And then the chapter also discussed ways or strategies in which to develop student-student relationship, because you shouldn't only worry about teacher-student relationships, because even though obviously that's extremely important, student-student relationships are equally important, because the more students get along within a class, the better the class will flow. And the author talked about conducting get-to-know-you activities or teamwork activities in order for students to build those student-student relationships. And then it also talked about developing teacher-parent relationships. And in order to do so, it talked again, be respectful of parents' cultural differences and their social economic challenges. Again, if you work in an urban school, it's a lower income school, and many of these parents probably work 2 jobs just to make it through, so you have to be aware of all that. You can send a welcome letter home to parents so they see that, you care, that you're willing to take the time to do that. Also make the first parent interaction a positive interaction. You don't want to make a meeting with the parent to tell them that their child has been acting out. They don't want to hear that. Then they're just going to remember you as that teacher who you criticize their child. You want to maybe communicate with them and tell them that their student has been excelling in whatever you're teaching. I mean, they want to hear positive things from you, just not negative things. And if you start with positive things, and maybe later you do have to connect with them to talk to them, or meet with them to talk to them about, their child acting out for whatever reason, then at least they've already built that strong relationship with you where they feel comfortable because you've not only reached out about negative things. Also, make sure to send positive notes or emails home. They're going to want to see this. Send progress reports home. Make sure that the students and the parents know where they stand with how they're doing in your class. Welcome parent input. Be open to any suggestions they may have, just so they know you have an open mind. And then also engage parents in school activities and projects if you have any. And you can also develop a school website or newspaper, because again, many of these parents, have limited time to be able to go to school. So if you have a classroom website or a newspaper where they can, access at home to see what's going on in your class, that'll also be helpful. So again, chapter 5 focused mainly on just building strong relationships, whether it be teacher-student relationships, student-student-teacher relationships, or parent-teacher relationships. All these relationships are extremely important in a classroom setting. And then finally, we went on to teaching the taboo, and again, we read chapters 3 to 4. Chapter 3 just focused on a teacher's classroom, Avi's classroom, and what this is pretty much showing is how he develops strong relationships with the students, which again, we've been talking about throughout all these books, and how he allows them to think critically about many issues. They discuss different issues, question different issues. He's created an environment where they feel safe to share. And again, he also stresses the importance of thinking and feeling. All this is extremely important when teaching the taboo. Again, he's going out of the norm, allowing all these students to discuss different issues that maybe they would not have been allowed to discuss in a different class. And then chapter 4 goes on to talk about subjects of science and math, and how certain educators have made these subjects boring. They haven't connected the subject content to students. And so teachers need to learn to be creative, engaging, and experimental in order to be successful with all students. And that's all.